The first bill is sponsored by Representative Corvese. It's an act related to criminal offenses, disorderly conduct, unlawful interference with traffic. It criminalizes and sets mandatory minimum felony sentences for the unlawful interference with traffic upon federal and state highways of the state of Rhode Island. Doc, you're here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, can you hear me?
I can, but it's a little muted.
Well, I'm going to do the best I can. Is that any better?
That's a little better.
Okay. Yep. I hope the rest of the committee can hear me. So, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of House Judiciary. This evening, you have before you House Bill 5001, which, in essence, makes it illegal to obstruct traffic on a highway. Regarding the genesis of this bill, I was listening to the radio in the fall of 2020, and Senator Leo Reptakis was discussing a bill he was introducing, or reintroducing, making it illegal to protest on a highway. He indicated there may not be a House companion to the bill. After some research, I decided to introduce this bill on the House side. The intent of the bill is quite simple. I do not care who you are. I don't care if you're the most fervent anti-abortion activist or the most fervent BLM activist. I don't care if you're on the right, the left, or the middle. I don't care if you are a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian, a Socialist, a Communist, or an anarchist. I don't care about the color of your skin, your nationality, your ethnicity, your religion, your gender or gender identity. I don't care if you believe the importance of your cause is immediate in nature or if your concerns are for the distant future. I don't care who you are, what you represent, or what you stand for. Don't protest on the highway. That's it. That's all. There is no Trojan horse here. There is nothing here, and I intend nothing here, other than the most obvious. There is an overriding public safety issue that is glaringly obvious to the most casual observer. Now, you will hear a range of reasons for not passing this bill. Some, not all, but some from Mr. Brown from the ACLU engender legitimate debate. Others characterize the bill as racist, as an attempt to bolster white supremacy structure within law enforcement, an attempt to disenfranchise from protesting or silencing black and brown activists. Propriety prevents me from responding to these baseless, outlandish, and politically motivated claims in this venue in the same manner I would address them to constituents in private conversations throughout my district. Publicly, I would say to those opposing this bill within the Twitterverse, I would direct you to a statement, correctly or incorrectly attributed to Sigmund Freud. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. This bill is what it is. There is an overwhelming public safety concern here, both for the protesters and the innocent travelers along the highways. Someone could get hurt, maimed, or killed. As to the inevitable debate surrounding our First Amendment, I would offer this. There are, and have been, fortunately or unfortunately, restrictions legally placed upon many of our rights. Just because you may, and I underscore may, have a right to do something does not mean it is a good idea to do it, or that you should. So it is on the merits. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would suggest at this time that should yourself and the committee see merit in the intention of this bill, but feel the penalties for conviction should be modified, I certainly have no problem with any reasonable alterations for a first and second conviction, as long as a third conviction results in a felony. I would leave that to the discretion of the committee within your deliberations. I had another paragraph that I was going to read. And I'm thinking of a person that I I discussed this last paragraph with, and I think the only thing I will say in conclusion, if you want to make Rhode Island a safer and saner place, pass the bill. Thank you, and I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the sponsor from the members of the committee? I don't see any. Second call. Oh, Jose. You wish to ask a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask quickly, Representative Corvese, you would agree with me that this conduct is already illegal under Rhode Island law, and that what your bill seeks to do is to merely heighten the punishment for this conduct. Is that correct?
I would agree that there are situations that are already on the books, as you've just alluded to, Representative Batista, where some laws could be applied, but you're correct certainly in the last part of your statement that I would like to tighten things up. I want to make it extremely, extremely clear. Again, no matter what anyone may think or say, to me this is a true public safety situation. And again, I don't care who you are. Okay, I was reading something on the Twitterverse. Someone said, ask Corvese if he would have prosecuted the people at the Capitol protest, the Capitol riots. Yes. For the sake, if this was law, and they violated the law, they should be prosecuted. And that's that. It's very simple and very straightforward. Again, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Thank you.
Any further questions of the sponsor? Yes, John.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
No problem.
Thank you, Chairman Corvese. So, can we agree that trespassing is a crime?
Yes.
What about disturbing the peace?
Yes.
Disorderly conduct?
Yes.
Obstruction of justice?
Yes, Counselor.
Resisting arrest?
Yes.
Assault?
Yes.
Vandalism?
Yes.
And one of your favorite crimes that you mentioned earlier off the record was arson. Is that a crime?
I don't think I mentioned arson.
No, that was before off the record, I said. We were joking about 5 minutes will get you 20.
Oh, okay.
5 minutes will get you 20,
Yeah,
right?
that was with Chairman McNamara.
That's correct. That's correct.
That's correct.
So, and so those are all crimes.
That's correct.
Yet the police choose not to use what they have readily available to them.
You'd have to ask them, Counselor.
Well, I have. Actually, I know of at least 3 instances where 3 of those people, the cases were actually dismissed. And, there's really not a willingness. But, this is about, if the crime is being committed, I think it's been well enunciated that, there are crimes there. There's, no doubt about it in some instances. But I think tantamount is that, people have a First Amendment guarantee, which is, right to assemble, right to free speech, right to expression. And, in many instances that overrides. But certainly, you shouldn't be jaywalking, blocking traffic, obstructing, but, sometimes that's what this is all about. This is exactly what the protesters want, what they want to accomplish, which is to get everybody's attention, to draw attention to a particular issue. And, it concerns me when someone, not you, but when we want to, minimum mandatories. It's the worst thing in the world when you're trying to negotiate that with a judge. We need to leave the discretion with the judges, number one. Number two, and this affects in the poorer neighborhoods more than anything. Certainly my neighborhood, I'm sure Representative Batista, I don't want to speak for anybody else. people are more, because they can't afford lawyers, they're more apt to, cut deals and, they'll be violators. And here's the thing about having a felony on your record, as some people may or may not know, I'm not suggesting anybody here does, and that is, it hurts with employment, it hurts with housing, it hurts with getting loans, but here's where it really hurts in some instances. You can't go to your son or your daughter's sporting events. You can't coach. You can't volunteer because you have this felony on your record. So it's just a bit much. I just think that, in my humble opinion, the laws are there. This is about a willingness as to whether or not they want to enforce it. That's just my opinion on this.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to my dear friend, Representative Lombardi?
Yes.
Two things. After you finished asking me those questions, besides feeling that I was on the stand, I'm wondering, are you trying to poke holes in my argument, or are you trying to bolster my argument? Because while it may be true, all those laws are on the books, whether or not they've been applied, perhaps they're looking for something more specific that is specific to protesting on the highway. The second thing is, as I said in my speech to you and and the chairman and the other members of the committee, I have no problem if this bill is reconfigured where the intent is maintained but the penalties are modified. So I have no problem. I could work with you or Chairman Craven or anyone else on the committee to see this through where the intention is maintained. Thank you.
May I respond?
Yes, Representative Lombardi.
Thank you, and I don't want to go, repartee back and forth. No, I respectfully disagree with that. Again, the laws are there. This is about the police and their willingness to apply the laws as they exist. I think they're there. If something is egregious, if something is done that's over the top, like burning a police car, well, that's arson. You could charge them with arson. So I think the laws are there to specifically make this. I mean, we're going to create another misdemeanor. I don't think that's what you want to do. And I don't mean to speak for you, but I just think the laws are there. And just a matter of do your job if you want to do your job, meaning the police. And if they want the attorney general or the local city or town to do their job, that's fine with me.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thank you. Rob Craven, I think somebody had their hand up.
Yes, who's next? Please identify yourself, speaking verbally if you've...
Representative Norrie.
Oh, okay, I can't see you.
Thank you,
Go ahead.
Chairman. If I could respond.
Yep.
I think I'm the only retired or law enforcement officer on this committee, and I can tell you as a police officer, more tools in the tool bag are helpful in those types of situations and any type of situation when an officer is on the street. So again, every opportunity to add a tool to the tool bag is very important. That's why they've come out with tasers and different alternatives to deal with different situations. Things to be more specific, I agree that this legislation should be toned down, but I think that shall issue a fine is probably pretty important in this legislation, and I do agree that it probably should be toned down to a misdemeanor, and I have discussed that with the drafter of this legislation to express my opinion. But again, deterrence is very important in any situation. Now, I will tell you today that I contacted my local community and I asked them if I wanted to have a parade and have, again, block the streets, that there's a process. And I could apply for a permit, I could hire police officers to block the street, and I could provide an area, shut down the community, and provide an area where I could obstruct the roadway, and it would be at a minimal expense. It would take a short period of time to get the town council to approve a parade permit, and I could peacefully celebrate, argue, protest, whatever I wanted to do in the street in that fashion, and do it legally, and get away with, have my point made, and get the community to rally around my point. Again, tools in the tool bag, I think, are very important from a law enforcement perspective. Thank you.
Yes, Carol. You're unmuted. You got on mute. No. Got on mute. Hey. No, you went back out again. Press the button and make it green.
How's that?
That's great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Doc. I have to say on this one, I got to go along with John. Let's think about what we're really talking about. We're talking about protesters. Protesters we could go as far back as civil rights. We can go to Vietnam War. It's been going on for centuries. I mean, do we want to make these people felons? I don't think so. I mean, sometimes things get out of hand, and like John said, if you burn a police car, if you won't break up after vandalism and different kind of things where people are getting violent and destructive, that falls into a whole different category. But there are times in the world when protesting against a certain issue of the day is something that we have to be tolerant to some degree, and we don't want to turn these people into felons. And I think the laws are sufficient as they are, and I don't want to see us locking up more young people with criminal records who can never get a job because they were passionate about their issue. So I have to respectfully disagree on the penalties that you're requesting. Felony, I think, goes too far. But I'll always work with you, as you know, to bring it to a consensus if that's what we have to do. So, thank you.
Thank you.
May I respond?
Representative Lombardi.
I think, I'll defer to Representative Wright. He hasn't had an opportunity yet.
John, you can finish.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, remember, this stays on your record 5 years after completion of your sentence, even if it's a misdemeanor. I think the tools are there. We don't need more arrows in the quiver. This is a time where we're looking to decarcerate rather than incarcerate. This harkens me back to only a few of you are my age. When I was 18, if you could call with, a half a stick of marijuana, it was like worse than having a gun on you. And I think Representative McEntee stated it well. They're protesting. They're speaking their mind. This is their will. And, to put an indelible mark on them for the rest of their life, or at least for 6 years, it may be cost prohibitive. That's all I'm going to say on that. So,
Mr. Chairman?
I think the tools are there.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Yes, Doc.
John, I understand, Representative Lombardi, I understand what you're saying. As far as the issue of incarcerating or decarcerating, I think that's a tangential issue. That's a policy issue that I'm sure is going to be discussed in other bills. I've already said that I have a willingness to modify the penalties here. But having said that, I think that if you're going to do this and you're doing it 3 or more times, I think the ante has to be increased.
Further questions from members of the committee? Dave Bennett.
I'm gonna err on the side of safety. If I have a protester walk out in front of my car and I stop, somebody rear ends me and drives me into those protesters, whose fault is it? You know, is it my fault because I drove into them, or is it their fault that they walked out in front of my car on 95? That's the question I think Doc is trying to get across. It's not like applying for a permit for a parade. You can't have a parade on 95. You can't have a parade on 295. I think that's like they're crossing the line when they go on the big highways, because you may not be able to stop when they're coming out. Or 20, 30 cars back may get hit in the rear end, and then you've got a bunch of problems on your hands. And I can understand what Doc's saying in this bill. I don't know about the penalties. We have quite a few people on this committee that could answer that about the penalties. I'm just saying, what if? What if people get hurt really bad because some protester decides to run out of the 95 and stop traffic? Thank you.
Further questions of members of the committee? All right, seeing none, we have 9 witnesses that I'm aware of. We have several other reps that are waiting with us to put bills into play, one of which is a second one for Dr. Corvese, who have little or no witnesses. So unless there's anyone on the committee that says otherwise, speak up now. I'd like to put the rest of the bills in play, and if, especially those where there are no other witnesses, those representatives, like I see Chairman has an arrow there, he can leave and go about the rest of his day. So, if that's okay with everybody, and we go back now to the bill we began this hearing with, House Bill 5001, sponsored by Chairman Corvese. It talks about the criminalization for the unlawful interference with traffic upon a federal and state highway. There's already been testimony by the chairman, Steve, so you can proceed with your comments and or testimony. You still there, Steve? Nope. Roberta, did we lose him?
We're calling him back.
Did we lose him?
We did. We're calling him right back.
All right. Steve?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was disconnected.
Okay. We're talking about House 5001, Chairman Corvese's
Yes.
bill on traffic offenses on the highway.
Yes, thank you. Again, this is something we've submitted some more detailed written testimony on. The ACLU does oppose this bill. There was a lot of, I think, helpful discussion at the beginning with Representative Corvese's introduction of his bill. There are 2 points in particular that I'd like to make. Representative Corvese began his discussion by talking about how he doesn't care who's doing it, right, left, Democrat, Republican, and that's absolutely true. The bill is neutral in terms of who is doing it. It's a crime for all of them. The problem is the restriction that does exist is it applies when you're protesting. That's what it's focused on, and our concern is that it singles out protest for this type of harsh and punitive criminal treatment. We think that's unfair. I mentioned in my testimony that if we're concerned about safety on the highways, you look at other criminal offenses, drunk driving is a misdemeanor. It has a 1-year sentence. Driving so as to endanger resulting in physical injury has a shorter sentence than this bill proposes. So, we are very concerned about the focus, the singling out of people engaged in protest for this type of crime. Now, I appreciate the comments that have been made about, well, maybe we'll reduce the penalties to a misdemeanor. But as you've heard from Representative Lombardi and others, there are already crimes on the books. People can be arrested for this conduct already. And in fact, they have been. The last protest that took place in October, a number of people were in fact arrested under disorderly conduct statutes and other statutes. Representative Norrie mentioned, well, it's good to have more tools in the toolbox, but we find that very troubling as well, because what more tools in the toolbox means in this context is just being able to pile on charges against an individual. So instead of charging them with one misdemeanor, you charge them with 2, 3, 4, and the ultimate effect of that is to often coerce individuals into pleading rather than contesting the charge, because they face serious penalties. If you have a number of misdemeanors, they add up, and that can be intimidating to individuals. We don't believe that there's a need to have this sort of piling on of charges. If there are already laws on the books that allow people to be charged for this activity, that should be sufficient. We're very concerned about letting police and prosecutors be able to harass individuals by just throwing lots and lots of charges that are essentially duplicative in order to force them to plea. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Dr. Corvese.
Happy New Year again, Stephen. How are you?
I'm fine. Happy New Year to you again, too.
You do, just one question. You do agree that the way the bill is written, it does not prejudice against or is biased against any particular type of protest or protester?
I do agree. The only caveat I'd make is that any law like this can be selectively enforced. So even if its intent is to cover everybody,
Stephen, no laws should be selectively enforced. And I'm not saying that historically in this country that has not necessarily happened. But I agree with your statement. But that is a different issue for a different bill. Okay? The fact that that would be done by those who are enforcing the law. The law, the wording of the law is that it does not bias against or is protesting or discriminates against any particular type of protester. That's all I want to hear.
On its face, absolutely. You are correct.
Thank you, Stephen. And that's not to say you do not have a legitimate argument for another bill. Thank you.
Any other questions of Steve Brown? I don't. Oh, John, go ahead. Representative Lombardi.
Thank you. Am I unmuted? Okay, yeah. So,
Yes.
But Steve, we can't agree that in many instances, especially in the impoverished areas in the minority community, the people that are not able to defend themselves or cannot hire a private attorney, that this could be utilized to pile on. So you could be charged with trespassing, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, vandalism, and this other charge, and it may bring someone to their knees if they're negotiating some kind of a plea deal in the district court, if that's where the charges may be. How do you feel about that, Steve?
Yes, no, I agree absolutely, and that was the point I was trying to make. You know, too often there are overlapping, duplicative charges that, you know, by passing laws like this, you give prosecutors enormous discretion to really make it difficult for individuals to defend themselves because they face so many charges and so many penalties. And that is why we should always be reluctant to add a crime to the books, to the general laws, when the crime itself is already there in another context.
Thank you, Steve.
Any further questions of Steve Brown? I don't see any or hear any. So that would bring us, thanks, Steve. That would bring us to the next witness, Enrique Sanchez. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You're live testifying in front of the House Judiciary Committee. My name's Bob Craven. You can proceed with your testimony on House Bill 5001, sponsored by Chairman Corvese.
Okay. Yes, good evening. My name is Enrique Sanchez. I'm a working class Latino member of the Providence community. I am here because I do not believe that this bill should be created. This country, this nation, right, was created, or was formed on the behalf that people had freedom of speech, freedom to protest, freedom to protest authoritarian governments, institutions that oppress the marginalized communities, the people who have been forgotten, who have been left out. Whenever there is a oppressive force against people, the people have the right to fight back and resist. This bill that is being introduced, and people who are trying to support it, are people that do not understand the voiceless, people that don't understand the situation that we're in. Protesting anywhere is not illegal, shouldn't be illegal anywhere on our grounds of our disposal. It's a sign of resistance to the institutions. Young people have been protesting, all types of people, black, brown, white, people of color, the LGBTQ plus community, have been protesting all year round, resisting these institutions who have, for so long, years, hundreds of years, have oppressed people. I was there on that bridge, and we were not doing anything wrong. We were exercising our voices. The officers there, the state patrolmen, the Providence police, got aggressive. Were violent. Pepper sprayed young people. Pepper sprayed the press. Pepper sprayed people who were not doing anything but just protesting. We will not stop protesting whenever there is police brutality. We will not stop protesting when there is a black or brown or working class people being murdered on the streets by police officers and racist police officers. These protests, these acts of resistance are not going to end until there is equality and justice and equity towards all people, not just the wealthy elites and the upper class, to all people, of all color, of all backgrounds, of all religion, etc. Thank you so much.
Any questions of Enrique Sanchez by members of the committee? Seeing none, Steve Alquist from Uprise, Rhode Island is the next witness. Steve Alquist?
Yeah.
Hi, Steve. Bob Craven. You're
ready to go
before the House Judiciary Committee on Chairman Corvese's bill. You can proceed when you want to.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Steve Alquist. I'm calling in from the Twitterverse. I stand by all the things I submitted in writing on this bill, but I have additional comments. You know, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and I'm putting good in quotes here. To me, this means that Representative Corvese's intentions for the bill are meaningless if the end result is more systemic racism. We can say that this bill isn't meant to target any one group, race, or set of beliefs, but that's disingenuous. The protests this bill are responding to are protests against the over-policing and hyper-criminalization of black and brown people. Through the last year, activists have been loudly telling you, our elected representatives, that they are sick and tired of being dehumanized by a policing, criminal justice, and prison system that profits from destroying their lives. They are tired of literally being murdered on video in the streets and in their homes. It seems to me that your responsibility as legislators is to do something about this. You need to step up and pass laws that truly reform our system, hold the perpetrators of racial injustice accountable, stop criminalizing the lives of black and brown people, and work to create a truly fair and just justice system. This bill does not do any of that. This bill seeks to cruelly felonize or further punish the protesters for their attempts to be heard. We could be talking about reforming a broken bail system. We could be talking about reforming juvenile probation. We could be making it legal for undocumented immigrants to drive their cars, or we could be decriminalizing substance use and engaging with this issue medically. There are easily 100 things this legislature could be doing right now to make the system less cruel, less racist, and more fair. So I'm asking you, imploring you, to do these more difficult things and not succumb to easy and, I have to say, racist fixes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve. Any questions of Steve Alquist? Dr. Corvese.
Rep. Corvese's fine. Stephen, how are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
Stephen, I respect your opinion. We're diametrically opposed on this, but I want to say I respect your opinion. I think your characterization is incorrect. I understand your motivation, but I just want to go on the record and say I believe your characterization is incorrect. Other than that, I hope you have a great year, and please avoid the pandemic.
Well, I'm doing my best.
Thanks, Doc. Any other comments or questions of Steve Alquist by members of the committee? Okay, I don't see any. Next witness is Haley McKee from the Substance Use Educational Recovery PAC. Haley, you're on the air. You're in front of the House Judiciary Committee. Please proceed.
Thank you.
Haley?
Yes.
Okay, you can proceed. Go ahead and testify.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Craven and honorable members of the committee. My name is Haley McKee. I am a Providence resident, and I am here in strong opposition of House Bill 5. Oh, I'm sorry, am I on? Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Craven. Okay. Good evening, Chairman Craven and honorable members of the committee. My name is Haley McKee. I am a Providence resident, and I am here in strong opposition of House... Yes. Oh, thank you. Good evening, Chairman Craven and honorable members of the committee. My name is Haley McKee, and I am here in strong opposition of House Bill 5001. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I am a person who has been able to partake in a lot of the recent protests following this movement, starting with the murder of George Floyd in May, and I have concerns about this bill. It omits highways, it crosses them out on it, and includes anyone who's protesting streets, sidewalks, railways, etc. for the passage of persons, vehicles, or conveyances. And I just had a couple of concerns as we've been regularly marching on Westminster, on the Department of Corrections grounds, Smith Street right in front of the State House, Broad Street and Elmwood Ave, and parts of Memorial Boulevard, where in fact 10,000 people marched in unity in May in support of this movement. And I'm concerned that this bill puts all of these state roads under that umbrella and potentially opens up a felonious mandatory minimum of 1 year, which, reading it on its surface, is really truly racist and really misplaced. And it's unfortunate to see that this is coming out of the General Assembly. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Haley. Any questions of Haley McKee? I don't see any. I don't hear any. Next witness is Jackie Goldman from Brown University. Jackie Goldman?
Yes, hello.
Hi, how are you? It's Bob Craven. You're testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. Proceed
Absolutely.
when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Representative Craven and Corvese and the rest of the members of House Judiciary. My name is Jacqueline Goldman, and I am an epidemiologist at Brown University School of Public Health. And I study a bunch of things, but one of the things that I look at is the impacts of incarceration and health. I first of all want to echo the sentiments and the words shared by Steve Brown and Steve Alquist, but want to add some other perspective to this. So earlier in the testimony, Representative Lombardi mentioned that one of the problems with this bill, and I would agree with it, is that it creates a pathway for more people to be felonized for doing something that is really crucially important. If we look at the impacts of incarceration on health, we see that by being incarcerated, giving people a felony conviction, that then bars them from a ton of things, including access to housing, access to healthcare, access to so many other things. As people have pointed out, while Representative Corvese believes in his heart of hearts that this bill will not lead to discriminatory policing, the fact is that very much in the structure of this bill, it will lead to that. He mentions that we can have other bills that will change the discretionary outcomes of policing, but in fact, we've tried to submit those before, and police unions and correctional unions have made sure that those bills don't pass. I will also add that Representative Corvese has received about $8,000 in money from both police and correctional unions, but that's just an aside. But I really think that if we care about people in Rhode Island, if we care about giving the voice to people who are unheard, we need to do things that remove criminalization, remove felonization, and make sure that people have the ability to protest as they need. And this bill is very harmful to that. I also want to make a quick note. I also object to Bill 5093, which criminalizes people that is the roadway with the passage of roadways. I've actually been hit by 2 cars, both as a pedestrian and as a cyclist, and I still condemn this bill because I think that anything we do that adds to criminalization is fundamentally bad. And I also want to lend support to the bill on marriage solemnization. As a queer person, I believe that we need to do more to make access to solemnization easier. And I have a lot more that I could say, but I've left it in written testimony and would be happy to get any questions from Representative Corvese or from other members of the Judiciary Committee.
Any questions by the committee of Jackie Goldman? Yes, Representative Corvese.
That $8,000 you mentioned, how many years was that over?
You're right. I don't know, but I can say that it is documented that those finances have been received. I can send you that.
Believe me, it's been documented. I cross my T's and I dot my I's. I was just curious about over how many years that would be. Thank you.
Right. The reason why I bring that up is in academia, we have a strict tradition of giving disclosures of interest anytime that we propose a bill. And so in the nature of transparency, I just wanted to make that statement clear. And you're right, it doesn't say over how many years, but the fact is it's still money received.
Any further questions by the committee of Jackie Goldman? I don't see any. I don't hear any. So I'll move on to the next witness, Gregory Waxmaluski. Greg, are you on?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. Proceed. You're testifying now before the House Judiciary Committee on House Bill 5001, sponsored by Chairman Corvese, an act related to criminal sentences that relates to interference with traffic upon federal and state highways. You can proceed.
Yes, and I thank you very heartily for the ability and opportunity to do so. And I also want to thank all of the esteemed members of the Senate of the House of Representatives Judiciary Committee for all that you do for the rest of the House, for the entire General Assembly, for your constituents, and for all the residents and citizens of the state of Rhode Island. It's magnificent that we have you functioning in this position in our system of government. I also want to take one moment before I testify to this bill just to call out a basic fact of where we all stand tonight, virtually or otherwise. This is not our land. This land belonged and still belongs to the First Nations peoples that were here predating any Anglo-European discovery of these lands. The Wampanoag, the Narragansett, the Pekanaket people are all of us. We are all in their debt. So that is our land tribute tonight at this hearing. To move on to the piece of legislation that this committee is considering, I have to say, this is a brilliant first act in this session. Thank you for calling so many concerned citizens to the room to testify before you as to what may or may not be a necessary piece of policy. It seems to a lot of folks that the general law, 1145, that this amends, may be in fact okay the way it is. If it's true that a felony conviction for a first-time offender of loitering or interfering in a highway is too steep, then this piece of policy seems a little bit unnecessary. If it's true that there's something decidedly different between a highway space and all of the other sites that are referenced in this chapter of our general laws, then perhaps what is needed is not merely an amendment to an existing piece of law. Perhaps what we need is to consider altogether a separate bill. With that being stated, there are numerous reasons, to a lot of people's readings, why this amendment seems to render a fairly straightforward general law in our body of laws a little bit incoherent. By singling out one particular type of obstruction or interference in one particular space, alongside so many other manifold options in the general law, and by introducing penalties that seem out of step with the other sentencing recommendations in this law, we risk turning a general law that is credible and coherent to every member of society into something that is not coherent or credible. It undermines, in fact, it undermines the ability of this law to do what it was intended to do. I don't know if that's what the House Judiciary Committee is looking to do as one of its first forays in this session. So I strongly suggest that this bill be held for reconsideration and or amendment until such a time as it can do what it's perhaps intended to do, which is to protect people, protect motorists, and more importantly, to protect the free flow of traffic and transportation in elevators, in egress and ingress ways, on sidewalks, on streets, and yes, on highways. Thank you so much for hearing me and all of my fellow citizens and residents of Rhode Island who showed up tonight. Now, we may be going home tonight, but we are not going away, and we look forward to working with this committee going forward on all kinds of legislation. And we encourage you to do everything that you can to work together with your colleagues to make sure that all Rhode Islanders are covered by these laws. Thank you so much for your time. I'm open to questions if anybody has any.
Any questions of the witness by the members of the committee? I don't see any, I don't hear any, but thank you, Greg, for your inspiration and compliments to the members of the committee and the legislature. The next witness will be Nate Levin Asperson.
Chairman, we were not able to reach him, so we'll go on to the next.
Okay, Thomas Duffy. Thomas.
Yes.
Bob Craven, I'm chair of the Judiciary Committee. You're live testifying before them on House Bill 5001, sponsored by Chairman Corvese. It's a law related to unlawful interference with traffic on federal and state highways.
Good, I appreciate it.
Okay.
May I start?
Yep, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Tom Duffy. I'm here to voice my strong objection to mandatory minimum sentencing for interfering with traffic on state highways. Increased penalties are unnecessary at best, and at worst, will have the effect of racialized voter disenfranchisement. I moved to Rhode Island from Missouri in part to raise my daughter in a community that more closely aligns with my values. The state of Missouri has passed similar punitive measures in response to civil rights protests in St. Louis. This law follows a tradition set by southern states, criminalizing the nonviolent protest strategies of civil rights activists. Elevating a protest tactic to the level of a felony functions to strip voting rights from those who are passionately fighting for their civil rights. If the application of this law follows the tradition of other such laws, it will disproportionately harm the lives of and civil rights of Black and brown people. Please take a moment on the second day of Black History Month to consider the impact this law would have made on the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Martin Luther King did in fact block traffic on state highways, marching from Selma to Montgomery for civil rights. And remember that the largest protest in Rhode Island's history happened last year, demanding justice for George Floyd. The movement targeted by this legislation, and it is this movement which is targeted by this legislation, is the very same civil rights movement from that era. This legislation is unnecessary and harmful to our collective civil rights. And I would ask that it be placed in the dustbin of history. Please vote against this House bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Thomas.
That's all.
Any questions for Thomas Duffy? I don't see any. I don't hear any. The last witness on this bill is Randall Rose. Randall, you're up again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Well, this is not the first time this is the first time this bill has been introduced, but it's not the first time Representative Corvese has introduced bills like this. I've testified against many of his bills that have been against protesters and all of them, and unfortunately, none of them have passed before. I hope this one does not either. As a number of people have pointed out, this is an extremely harsh bill. It does express a great antipathy towards protesters, and I've heard a number of people trying to are kind of half trying to defend the bill, saying, even though this bill is so way too harsh, maybe we could tone it down a little. Maybe we could pass a different version of it. No, this bill is just badly written from start to finish. The way it's written, it would criminalize not just protesters, not just people who block traffic, but just about anyone who's in the road for any reason. It's in the zeal to punish people who protested, it goes way too far and ends up targeting people who could not have imagined they would be targeted by this law. Unfortunately, this bill is not salvageable. If some version of this bill does pass, everyone will know, just because of the sponsor whose name is on it, that the people who voted to pass it were voting to pass an effort that was driven by an antipathy towards protesters, which most Rhode Islanders do not share. So I don't think this bill can be saved at all. I'm going to talk about a couple of important considerations here. As everybody knows, this bill is in response to the protests that have gone on in recent years by people concerned about racial injustice, particularly in policing. And I just want to take this opportunity to say, and I wish more people would be saying it, that Black Lives Matter. But the bill is specifically about any kinds of activities on a street or highway that can be considered to be disturbing or disrupting traffic. But the image that the bill is meant to conjure up is the image of protesters who are upset about an unjust police killing, going onto a highway and blocking traffic, which, as we all know, has been done many times, and whether you agree with it or not, it has not caused any harm. It's responding to an unjust death, it's responding to a tragic killing, but the people who've done it have not caused any death, have not caused any harm. They've caused annoyance, but they have not caused any worse than that. And I think it's really unfortunate that we have these police killings going on, and despite the many years it's been in public attention, we have still not passed a single improvement to the law. The only response the legislature gives is to introduce these bills that are harsher and harsher towards protests. And that shows that, unfortunately, the elected officials are refusing to grapple with the problem. They're instead blaming and retaliating against the people who draw attention to the problem. And that's not a responsible way to fulfill the role that people were elected to do. I'm not blaming anyone in particular here, but it does show that the General Assembly is taking the wrong tack. We should be seeing many more bills to make sure that police are a little bit more careful, to make sure there's a little bit more transparency and a little less scope for discrimination of all kinds in policing, and a little less unnecessary force. And I'm saying that in an understated way, but unfortunately, we've never seen any action on the social wrongs that have drawn so much attention. Instead, we see bills, not just in Rhode Island, to target protesters. I just want to make a case about why we do not need to increase the penalty for what is already known to be disorderly conduct, which, as many witnesses have already said, could already be charged under a variety of other laws in addition to disorderly conduct. I'm just going to say more about why we do not need to increase the penalty or have an additional law on this. So I know that the argument that's going to be made is, well, we can't have people blocking the highway. Blocking the highway is the wrong response. Maybe there should be some other kind of response that protesters do instead of blocking the highway, which is a strange argument for legislators to be taking up, because the legislators aren't really doing anything about the problem, but that motivated the protest in the first place. But putting that aside, taking that argument at face value, let's grant all that. Let's say, okay, let's grant you're right. Protesters should not be blocking the highway. They should be doing some other unspecified thing instead, even though that so far no laws have been passed to deal with the problem. Okay, well, even if we grant all that, it's unfortunately, I think it's fair to say that the concerns of a large number of people in our society are not being heard here. That a lot of people are not just frustrated at killings like George Floyd's killing, not just upset, but really motivated by a strong sense of wanting to do something about injustice. And maybe you're going to say, okay, they want to do something, but they shouldn't go out and block the highway. Blocking the highway is a mistake. It's not the best approach. Okay, but let's give them some even if you think it's the wrong approach, let's give them some people some consideration, because it is very distressing to see that nothing is being done about this problem, and when people see nothing is being done, they want to go further and try to take further steps about it, whether that's blocking the highway or something else. And when you look at it, blocking the highway is really not that dangerous a response. It's not something that it's not something that causes a lot of damage. It's something that's a lot less damaging than the original series of killings that motivated this and provoked this. But it's actually de-escalating and toning things down to respond not with violence, but just by blocking the highway. If a law like this, however draconian you want it to be, if a law like this, say it hypothetically succeeded in stopping people from blocking highways in response to this epidemic of police killings that our laws are doing not enough to prevent. Suppose the law achieved its aim of stopping people from blocking highways. Well, we all know what would happen if we're willing to be honest about it. What would happen is if a law succeeded in blocking protest actions like that, and there was still no action from the legislature, some people would be angry enough that they would respond in some other way, not blocking highways, but something else. And I'm not going to speculate about what it could be, but I think anybody who's honest and thinks about it will realize that that kind of anger, due to the legislature not doing anything about the problem, will find some other outlet. And I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying whether it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong either. But I'm saying we all know that's going to happen. And the consequence, if this law had its desired effect in making this form of protest impossible, a form of protest that Martin Luther King used and that the supporters of Alexei Navalny in Russia used recently, if it succeeds in making this form of protest impossible, it's just going to lead to other kinds of outlets for anger, which may well be less peaceful and less constructive. The only way I can really understand this kind of bill is to say, well, maybe it's emotionally driven. Maybe some people really, really hate seeing protesters and they want to punish the protesters. And they say, why are these protesters blocking the public highway? Well, the underlying reason, unfortunately, why the protesters are blocking the public highway is that we have some unaccountable police and some of them do a lot of harm, and the legislature has not addressed the problem. And right now, we are in the State House, we are in the Committee on Judiciary, the committee that could do something about this, and let's face the fact that a more constructive approach to this would be, let's pass some sensible laws that strike a better balance about police issues, and then we wouldn't have these kind of protests on the highway. That would be a lot more constructive, and it would save some lives besides. But we all know that if a law like this passes, whether it's made more draconian or less draconian, even if it does deter some people from going on the highway, still, the next time the Pawtucket police kills some innocent person of color, there are going to be some kinds of angry reactions, and it shouldn't take these angry reactions to make us do the right thing and write better rules about police issues. So I'm sorry, but I just see this bill as a great effort, maybe not a deliberate effort, but in effect it's an effort by the elected officials to put the blame elsewhere, to say, look at these terrible young people of color who are blocking the highway, look at these terrible progressives who are blocking the highway, and to divert attention from their own failure to deal with the problem. Not criticizing anyone in particular, but that's how it's really going. And it's telling that this was the first bill introduced in this session, House 5001. It's time to just get rid of this bill. Don't pass it, just like Representative Corvese's other bills against protesters were not passed. And maybe someday let's get around to doing something to change the rules about police killing. Thank you.
Are there any questions of Randall Rose? I don't see any. I don't hear any. Roberta, I think we have Nate Levin Aspenson, who's found his way back to us.
Yes, he'll be on in a second.
Nate, you're on the air.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do you need my name and address for the record?
No, I've introduced you, Nate Levinson Aspenson.
That's approximately my name. Thank you. Yeah.
Do my best.
I'll keep my. Yeah, it's a tough one for the first time. I understand. I'll keep my remarks brief, as I understand you are hearing a lot of them tonight. I'm calling tonight to testify against House Bill 5001, which is a bill that introduces a felony penalty for blocking traffic or highways as part of a civil action or protest. I'll start with the most obvious reason that it should not be enacted into law, which is that these things are already illegal and punishable as misdemeanors. And then I will end with the more serious reason that it should not be passed into law, which is also the reason it is being introduced, because it is an attempt to use our judicial system as a bludgeon to weaponize it against black communities and marginalized communities of Rhode Island who have been protesting for their lives for the past year. I think it is flagrantly racist and unconstitutional. It should not be passed into Rhode Island law. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nate. If there are no questions, Roberta, do we have another witness to add to the,
We do.
Chloe Davis?
Chloe Davis, yes, she's on the line. One moment.
Okay, great. Chloe, can you hear me? Not yet. Chloe? Chloe Davis?
Yes.
Hi, Chloe. It's Bob Craven. I'm chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and you're on the air live testifying before the House Judiciary Committee on House Bill 5001. So you can proceed.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Chloe Davis. I am an attorney in Rhode Island, and I vehemently oppose House Bill 5001. I did submit written testimony, and I stand by that testimony, and I will try not to belabor a lot of the points that have already been made tonight. But I did want to make it clear that I think that this bill is unconstitutional, unnecessary, punitive, and intentionally oppressive. This is clearly targeting First Amendment protected conduct, and any conduct that is not protected is already illegal. The only purpose for this bill would be to create yet another unlawful criminal charge to be used against protesters and people of color. The only outcome that of this bill will be additional disproportionate arrests, charges, and prosecution against communities of color and protesters that the police don't like and do not agree with. And I say that from personal experience because I was arrested in October during a protest when I was not committing any offenses. I was arrested for the misdemeanor offense of disorderly conduct for blocking a street, which I was absolutely not doing. But the reality of the situation does not prevent the police from using criminal charges like this against people that they do not like, whether or not they were acting illegally. And so I think providing yet another tool for the police to use in an oppressive manner is the exact opposite of what the General Assembly should be focusing on right now. And as other speakers have already said tonight, it really does not matter whether this bill is intended to be racist or intended to be entirely neutral. That is utterly irrelevant. The point is that it will be used in a way that has a racist effect, because nearly all criminal laws have been proven to have disproportionate impacts on communities of color. And I would also like to say that I agree with everything that Steve Brown and Steve Alquist and Randall Rose and pretty much all of the other commentators have said tonight about this bill. It's utterly unnecessary. The conduct that it's targeting is already largely illegal or protected by the First Amendment. But I do want to say that, it's important to recognize that criminal charges, criminal statutes like this are used offensively. And so even if somebody is not violating the criminal statute, they can still be arrested and charged with a violation, and that charge pens for sometimes months, even up to a year. And during that time, those pending charges can have very significant detrimental effects on people. In Rhode Island, it is not illegal for employers to fire employees even for having been charged with a felony. And I very strongly oppose providing any additional weapons for the police to use against people that they disagree with. And I'd also like to say, as I believe has already been mentioned, that I am unaware of anyone being involved in a demonstration on a highway, federal or state, that caused any harm, that caused an accident, that caused, anyone to be injured. And so not only is this, I think, statute unconstitutional and extraordinarily harmful, it's also targeting a problem that doesn't exist. The harm caused by this statute would drastically outweigh any speculative harm that is being caused by protesters demonstrating on highways. And finally, I just want to say that this bill does not define the term federal or state highway. So it absolutely 100% will be used, against people of color in preposterous scenarios for, standing on small Rhode Island roads and will not be used to prevent the conduct that it appears to be targeting. It will just be harmful. And I don't want that to be taken as a suggestion that I think that the bill could be amended, because I absolutely do not. I think that it is, it's all around a bad idea, and this bill should not be passed in any form. And I would be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions of Chloe Davis by members of the committee? I don't see any. I don't hear anybody. So that concludes testimony on House Bill 5001, which brings us to